My wife told me, Evan's coming to Thanksgiving dinner. Please don't turn it into a thing. I smiled and said sure. What she didn't know was that I was about to add one more guest to the table. By the end of that night, 2 relationships would be over, and my mother would swear she was never letting anyone else manage the guest list again. My name is Caleb, I'm 31, and I'd been married to Natalie for almost 4 years. We live in Raleigh, North Carolina, but every Thanksgiving my family drives west to my parents' house outside Asheville. This year started going wrong 11 days before Thanksgiving. Natalie and I were eating takeout at our kitchen island when she put down her phone and said, like she was reminding me to buy ice, "By the way, Evan's coming with us this year." I stared at her. "Evan?" "Yes." "Your ex?" She rolled her eyes. "Caleb, you know who Evan is." Evan was her college boyfriend. They dated almost 4 years and lived together for one. They broke up less than a year before Natalie met me. According to her, it ended peacefully and they stayed friends. He was never openly rude. Instead, he acted like Natalie and he belonged to some private club I could never join. Every conversation became an old story, nickname, or joke that ended with both of them laughing while I waited for context. "You invited your ex-boyfriend to Thanksgiving with my family?" "He's having a rough month," Natalie said. "His plans fell through and he'd otherwise be alone." "And you asked me before inviting him?" Her expression changed. "Caleb, seriously? I knew you were going to react like this." "Like what? Jealous? Defensive? Weird?" I put my fork down. "You invited a man you used to live with to my parents' house for a family holiday without talking to me." She crossed her arms. "I already asked your mom. She said there's plenty of food." That was the part that really got me. "You called my mother before you talked to me?" "I called the person hosting dinner. That seemed logical." "No, it seemed easier because you knew she'd say yes." Natalie sighed. "Evan is my friend. He's going through something. Nothing is happening between us. I need you to trust me and act like an adult." Act like an adult. Not, "I understand why this bothers you." Not, "I should have asked." Just a sentence that made me the unreasonable one. I stayed quiet, then nodded. "Fine, he can come." Natalie relaxed. "Thank you. I knew you'd understand." I didn't understand. I just stopped arguing. Later that night, Natalie went upstairs to shower. Her phone was charging beside me when the screen lit up. "Evan, still can't believe you pulled this off. Thanksgiving together again, just like old times." I didn't touch the phone. Not yet, but I stared at that message until the screen went dark, and for the first time I wondered whether Evan was really coming because he had nowhere else to go. The next morning, I started paying attention.
Over the next 2 days, I noticed things I'd ignored before. Natalie smiled at her phone constantly. She carried it from room to room. If I walked into the kitchen while she was texting, the screen suddenly went face down. Maybe I was paranoid. Or maybe I was finally noticing what had been happening in front of me. On Friday night, Natalie fell asleep early. Her phone was on the nightstand. I knew her passcode. I'm not going to pretend what I did was noble. Going through your spouse's phone is a massive violation of privacy. But I also knew I wasn't imagining the secrecy anymore, so I opened it. Evan's conversation was near the top. They had been texting every day for almost 3 months. Most messages weren't sexual. Honestly, that almost made it worse. They talked about everything: work, family, problems, memories from college. Natalie complained about me constantly. "Caleb works too much. Caleb never wants to go anywhere spontaneous. Sometimes I feel like marriage made my life boring." Then came the messages that made my stomach drop. "Evan, do you ever miss us?" Natalie, "Sometimes." Evan, "We were pretty good together." Natalie, "We were also idiots." Evan, "Maybe, but sometimes I wonder whether we gave up too quickly." There was a pause in the conversation. Then Natalie had replied, "I wonder that too." I sat there, staring at those 4 words. Nothing physical, nothing she couldn't technically explain away, but I knew what I was reading. This wasn't friendship anymore. I took screenshots and sent them to myself. Then I kept scrolling. That's when something else caught my attention. Evan mentioned someone named Brooke. Not often, but enough that I searched his social media the next morning. It took less than 5 minutes. Brooke wasn't his sister. She wasn't a coworker. She was his fiancée. They had gotten engaged in August. Her profile was full of pictures of them together: weekend trips, restaurants, a beach vacation, engagement photos. One post from 2 weeks earlier showed Brooke holding up her ring while Evan kissed her cheek. The caption said they were counting down to the wedding. So why had Natalie told me he was alone and going through something? More importantly, why was a recently engaged man planning to spend Thanksgiving with his ex-girlfriend's family instead of his fiancée? I checked Natalie's messages again that evening. There wasn't a single mention of Brooke, not one. That told me almost everything I needed to know. I found Brooke's public profile and stared at the message button for nearly 10 minutes. Then I sent her a short message. "Hi. This is going to sound strange, but I'm Natalie's husband. Natalie used to date Evan. I was told Evan is spending Thanksgiving with my family because he has nowhere else to go. I recently learned you and Evan are engaged, and I thought you should know where he plans to be." I included my number. Brooke called me 40 minutes later. Her first words were, "What the hell are you talking about?"
She had no idea. Evan had told her he was attending a Thanksgiving weekend work event in Charlotte. I explained everything. Then I sent her the screenshots. She went completely silent. Finally, she said, "He told me Natalie barely speaks to him anymore." "That's interesting," I said, "because they've been talking every day." Brooke sounded like she was trying not to cry. Then she asked the question I had been waiting for. "When is this dinner?" "Thursday, 3 o'clock." Another long pause. Then I said, "You should come." She actually laughed once, probably because the idea sounded insane. "You want me to show up at your parents' Thanksgiving dinner?" "Yes." "Does Natalie know?" "No." "Does Evan know?" "No." Brooke went quiet again. "This is going to be a disaster." "Probably. And you're okay with that?" I looked across the room at Natalie, who was sitting on the couch texting Evan. "I think I'm past worrying about awkward." Brooke agreed. We made a plan. She would arrive about 30 minutes after Evan, and until then, neither of us would say a word.
Thanksgiving morning felt almost normal. That was the strangest part. Natalie made coffee. We packed the casserole she had promised my mother. She played music while getting ready and asked whether I thought her green sweater looked better than the cream one. I answered like nothing was wrong. Inside, I felt like I was carrying a live wire. We reached my parents' house just after 2. My mother had turned the dining room into something out of a magazine. Turkey in the oven, stuffing warming on the stove, pies lined up on the counter. My dad was watching football. My younger sister Megan was trying to stop her 6-year-old from feeding crackers to the dog. Everything smelled warm and familiar. For a few minutes, I almost questioned my plan. Then Natalie checked her phone for the 4th time in 10 minutes. At 2:38, she smiled. "He's here." Not "Evan's here," just "he." She walked to the front door before anyone else could move. Evan came inside carrying a bottle of bourbon and a bakery box. "Happy Thanksgiving," he said. My mother greeted him warmly because that's the kind of person she is. Natalie hugged him. It wasn't outrageous, but it lasted long enough for me to notice. When they separated, Evan looked at me. "Thanks for letting me crash the family dinner." I smiled and shook his hand. "Wouldn't want you spending Thanksgiving alone." For half a second, something changed in his expression. Then he smiled again. "Yeah, it's been a weird few weeks." I almost laughed. Instead, I offered him a drink. For the next 20 minutes, Evan played the perfect guest. He complimented my mother's cooking, he talked football with my dad, he asked Megan about her new job, and Natalie kept orbiting around him. Every time he told a story, she added details. Every time he laughed, she laughed louder. At one point, he mentioned a road trip they had taken in college, and Natalie interrupted him. "No, tell them about the motel." They both started laughing before the story even began. I had no idea what was funny. Neither did anyone else. At 3:07, my phone buzzed. Brooke, outside. My heartbeat immediately doubled. I stood. "I'll get it." Natalie barely looked at me. I walked through the hallway and opened the front door. Brooke stood there holding a bottle of wine and a small dessert box. She looked nervous, but not uncertain. "You okay?" I asked quietly. "No," she said, "but I'm here." "That makes 2 of us." I stepped aside. The moment Brooke entered the living room, everything stopped. Evan saw her first. His face drained of color. He stood so quickly his knee hit the coffee table. "Brooke?" Natalie turned. Her expression changed almost as fast as his. Brooke looked directly at Evan. "Happy Thanksgiving." "What are you doing here?" "I was invited." My father lowered the television volume. Megan looked from Brooke to Evan, then at me. I could practically see her putting the pieces together. Natalie stood up. "Caleb, who is this?" I looked at her. "This is Brooke." Silence. Then I added, "Evan's fiancée." My mother froze in the doorway, carrying a tray. "His what?" Natalie stared at Evan. "You're engaged?" That reaction surprised me. Not because she was shocked, because she looked genuinely hurt. Evan rubbed the back of his neck. "Natalie, I was going to tell you." Brooke laughed without any humor. "That's interesting, because you were also going to tell me you were at a company Thanksgiving event in Charlotte." Nobody spoke. Evan looked at me. "You contacted her?" "I thought she deserved an invitation." Natalie's face hardened. "You did this on purpose?" I nodded. "You invited your ex to my family's Thanksgiving event without asking me." Then I looked at Brooke. "So I invited his fiancée." I paused. "Seems fair." "Caleb, this is psychotic." "No, what's psychotic is lying to 2 people and expecting neither of them to compare notes." Evan stepped forward. "Look, everyone needs to calm down." Brooke turned toward him. "Great idea. Start by explaining why you lied about where you were going." "It's complicated." "No," she said, "it really isn't." Natalie looked at me again. "You had no right to involve her." That was when I finally stopped pretending. "I had every right once I found out you've been texting Evan every single day for 3 months." Natalie went completely still. Evan stopped talking. And suddenly, everyone in the room understood that Brooke showing up wasn't the biggest problem anymore. Natalie's face went pale. "You went through my phone?" "Yes." She looked furious, but underneath the anger I could see panic.
That's a huge violation of my privacy. You're right, and what I found was a huge violation of our marriage. Evan stepped between us slightly. This is getting out of control. Brooke turned toward him. No, you don't get to decide that now. She pulled out her phone. I've already seen the screenshots. Evan's expression changed. What screenshots? The ones where you asked Natalie if she ever missed being with you. He froze. Brooke continued. And the one where she said she wondered if you two gave up too soon. My mother quietly set the tray down. My dad turned the television off completely. Nobody was pretending this was normal anymore. Natalie looked at Evan. You told her? No, Evan said quickly. Caleb did. Because apparently I'm the only person here interested in everyone knowing the same version of the story. Natalie snapped her eyes toward me. We never did anything. I didn't say you did. Then stop acting like I cheated. I laughed once. You spent 3 months talking to your ex about our marriage, telling him you missed your old relationship and wondering whether leaving him was a mistake. That isn't cheating. Maybe not physically. The room went quiet again. But you were building something with him behind my back, and then you invited him into my parents' house and told me I was immature for being uncomfortable. She opened her mouth, but Brooke cut in. Actually, I'd like an answer too. She looked at Evan. You told me you barely talked to her. Evan sighed. Brooke, it wasn't like that. Then what was it like? She was having problems with Caleb. Natalie immediately turned toward him. What? You said you were unhappy. I complained sometimes. I never said I needed you to rescue me. Brooke stared at both of them. Interesting, because Natalie told Caleb that you were the one going through a hard time. That landed. Evan looked at Natalie. Natalie looked at Evan. Their stories didn't match. Not even close. My sister Megan actually whispered, wow. Evan tried again. Everybody is twisting things. Brooke shook her head. No, you lied to me about where you were going. You lied about how much you talked to Natalie. You hid the fact that you were spending Thanksgiving with your ex and her husband's family. She slipped off her engagement ring. Evan's eyes widened. Brooke, don't do this here. You chose here. She placed the ring on the coffee table. We're done. Come on. Nothing happened. I don't care. Brooke, I said we're done. Evan looked around the room as if someone would defend him. Nobody did. Brooke turned to me. Thank you for telling me. I'm sorry you had to find out like this. I'm not. She glanced toward the door. I think I'm going to leave. My mother finally spoke. You're welcome to stay for dinner. Brooke gave her a small smile. That's very kind, but I need to go. Evan grabbed his coat immediately. I'll drive you. No! Brooke, please. No. She walked out. Evan followed him anyway, calling her name. The front door closed. Now it was just Natalie and my family. Natalie stared at me with pure anger. You humiliated me. I shook my head.
No, I exposed what you were hiding. You planned all of this, yes. At Thanksgiving? Yes. You couldn't just talk to me privately? I tried talking to you when you invited Evan. You told me to grow up. Her eyes filled with tears. So what now? I had already decided that days ago. I want a divorce. My mother inhaled sharply. Natalie looked like I had slapped her. Caleb, I already spoke to an attorney. You're serious? Completely. This is insane. We can fix this. I don't want to fix a marriage where I have to investigate my own wife to get the truth. She started crying. I never slept with him. That's not enough anymore. She looked around the room. My father said nothing. My mother looked devastated. Megan wouldn't even meet Natalie's eyes. For the first time, Natalie seemed to realize nobody was going to tell me I was overreacting. She grabbed her purse. I can't believe you did this to me. I looked at her. That's exactly the problem. You still think I'm the one who did this. She left. The house stayed silent for several seconds. Then my dad looked at the abandoned engagement ring on the coffee table and said quietly, well, dinner's definitely going to be interesting. Nobody laughed, but somehow that broke the tension. And despite everything, we sat down to eat.
Thanksgiving dinner was uncomfortable, but somehow we got through it. My mother kept apologizing. I should have asked more questions when Natalie called me. It wasn't your fault, I told her. She gave you a completely different story. My dad mostly stayed quiet, but before I left that night, he put a hand on my shoulder. You handled yourself better than I would have. Coming from him, that meant a lot. I stayed at my parents' house that night. Natalie called me 9 times and sent more messages than I could count. Some were angry. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. Some were defensive. Nothing physical ever happened. Then came the apologies. Please come home. We need to talk. Don't throw away 4 years over messages. I responded once. Talk to my attorney. The next afternoon, my dad and Megan's husband came with me to the house to collect clothes, my laptop, documents, and a few other things. Natalie wasn't there. She had left a handwritten note on the kitchen counter. Caleb, I'm sorry. I know I crossed boundaries. I don't know why I let things with Evan go as far as they did. I never planned to leave you. I never wanted to destroy our marriage. Please, give me one chance to explain everything. I folded the note once, then dropped it in the trash. A week later, I met with my lawyer again. Natalie moved into her sister's apartment. She tried contacting me through mutual friends, but after hearing what had actually happened, most of them stopped trying to convince me to reconcile. A couple people told me inviting Brooke had been cruel. Maybe it was, but Brooke deserved the truth as much as I did. Speaking of Brooke, she texted me 4 days after Thanksgiving. She had officially ended the engagement. Apparently, Evan spent 2 days insisting that nothing physical had happened and that the messages had been taken out of context. Brooke told him the physical part wasn't the point. The lies were enough. According to friends, Evan blamed Natalie for ruining his engagement. Natalie blamed Evan for destroying her marriage. I thought that was almost funny. They both spent months making decisions together, then blamed each other when those decisions finally had consequences.
2 months later, the divorce process was moving faster than I expected. Natalie didn't fight much. We agreed to sell the house and divide everything without turning it into another war. I moved into a small apartment closer to work. For the first time in years, the place was completely mine. No tension, no wondering who Natalie was texting, no pretending something didn't bother me because I didn't want to sound insecure. Natalie sent me one final email. It was long. She apologized for lying, admitted that her relationship with Evan had become emotional cheating, and said she had convinced herself it was harmless because they never slept together. She also said she finally understood why telling me to act like an adult had been unfair. At the end, she asked whether we might be friends someday. I never answered. Maybe years from now, I'll feel differently. Right now, I don't. Brooke and I met for coffee once after everything settled down. Nothing romantic, we were just two people who had been lied to by the same pair of people. She seemed better. She had moved out of the apartment she shared with Evan and was planning a trip with her sister. Before we left, she thanked me again. If you hadn't messaged me, she said, I might have married him. I told her the truth. If you hadn't shown up, I might have let Natalie convince me I was overreacting. We both laughed. My family still talks about that Thanksgiving. Megan says it was the first holiday dinner where nobody remembered whether the turkey was good because everyone was too distracted by the engagement ring sitting on the coffee table. My mother has also created a new rule. Any unexpected Thanksgiving guest now requires approval from both spouses. And my dad, a few weeks after everything happened, he called me. I've been thinking about that dinner, he said. Oh God. No, seriously. There was a pause, then he laughed. I've hosted Thanksgiving for 32 years, and that was the first one where nobody fell asleep after dessert. I laughed harder than I had in months. I don't feel like I want anything. I lost a marriage I genuinely believed would last, but I also learned something. Sometimes the worst truth is still better than a comfortable lie. And if someone tells you to be mature because their behavior makes you uncomfortable, pay attention. Sometimes maturity isn't staying quiet. Sometimes it's finally refusing to pretend.